Welcome to StoriesX. What if having your boarding ticket torn up in front of everyone sparked a revolution, transforming humiliation into a powerful push for change at one of the world's largest airlines? Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications so you never miss another inspiring story from StoriesX. The concourse buzz of the usual frenetic energy of an airport in peak travel mode, rolling suitcases, clipped intercom announcements, and snatches of conversation forming a chaotic symphony. Amid this rush, Amara stood near Gate B, her heart pounded with a mix of excitement and quiet apprehension. Fresh off a transformative leadership conference, the young black traveler clutched her boarding pass and passport with determined pride. She'd learned to navigate challenges with grace, yet nothing could prepare her for what was about to unfold. Dressed in a neatly pressed button-down shirt and jeans, Amara radiated confidence even as a twinge of nervousness tugged at her. She reminded herself of her father's words, how true worth was measured not by status but by character and kindness. Today, however, her resolve would soon be tested in the most public way imaginable. Approaching the gate counter, Amara greeted the flight attendant with a warm smile. "Good morning," she said politely, handing over her passport. The attendant, a woman named Gloria whose name tag was barely visible beneath her severe expression, barely returned the greeting. Instead, Gloria's eyes flickered over Amara's face, and then the boarding pass. After a long, heavy pause, Gloria's tone turned sharp. "Are you traveling alone?" she asked, her voice laced with quiet suspicion. "Yes, ma'am," Amara replied softly. "I'm headed home after a few days at a leadership conference." Gloria's eyes narrowed as she scanned the ticket again, her demeanor growing rigid. "This ticket doesn't look valid," she muttered, almost to herself at first. Amara's pulse quickened. "That's my ticket," Amara insisted, a trace of uncertainty in her voice as she clutched a slip of paper. "It was booked by my father's office. Everything was confirmed this morning." Gloria's gaze hardened. "Don't try to pull a fast one," she snapped. "I've seen plenty of passengers like you trying to sneak on flights with fraudulent tickets." Her words stung, a reminder of the biases Amara had often brushed aside in the past. Before Amara could muster another word, Gloria's hand shot out, and in one swift, shocking motion, she ripped the ticket in two. The sound of tearing paper cut to the hum of the terminal, and every eye turned toward the unfolding drama. "What are you doing?" Amara cried, her voice trembling as she stared at the torn pieces clutched in her hand. "That's my ticket." Gloria didn't even pause to listen. "Move along, little girl. You're not boarding with a fraudulent ticket," she declared dismissively, her tone brooking no argument. A murmur rippled through the crowd, some passengers whispering in disbelief, others recording the incident on their phones. Amara felt her cheeks burn with humiliation and a rising, seething anger. In that moment, the terminal transformed from a space of routine travel into a stage for a public spectacle of prejudice. Shaken, Amara hesitated. She could call her father immediately, but she recalled his steady advice from countless past conversations. Stand tall, be patient, and let your character speak for itself. Still, the pain of being unjustly humiliated in front of strangers was almost too much to bear. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. "This ticket is legitimate," she said, her tone more resolute now. "I know it is. Please, just let me board." Gloria's eyes flashed with disdain. "Don't waste my time," she retorted coldly, already turning to the next passenger. Amara felt her world narrow around her. Every passing glance, every whispered comment deepened the sting. Unable to contain her frustration any longer, Amara's voice wavered as she spoke up again. "I promise you it's valid." "Aye." But her words were cut off as Gloria briskly dismissed her with a curt, "Save it. You're not going anywhere on this flight." Stunned and disheartened, Amara stepped back from the counter, her heart pounding in her ears. The sight of the shredded ticket in her hand was a bitter symbol of injustice, a tangible reminder that even in places meant for smooth transitions, bias could erupt without warning. In that charged silence, amid the bustling sounds of the airport, Amara felt a mix of fear, anger, and resolve. Though tears threatened to spill, she recalled her father's steady reassurance that every challenge was an opportunity to stand up for what was right. With trembling fingers, she pulled out her phone and dialed his number, her voice barely above a whisper as she said, "Dad, I need your help." The terminal around her seemed to fade as she waited for his familiar, comforting voice, a voice that always reminded her that her worth wasn't defined by someone else's narrow view. And as she clutched the torn ticket, Amara knew that today's painful experience was only the beginning of a journey toward reclaiming her dignity and challenging the prejudices that threatened to diminish her light. As the echo of the torn ticket faded into a heavy silence, Amara stood alone by the counter, heart pounded with a mix of humiliation and defiant anger. Around her, the busy terminal carried on, luggage wheels squeaking on tile floors, murmurs of curious onlookers blending with distant intercom announcements. But for her, time had slowed to a standstill. Clutching the ripped pieces of her boarding pass, she felt both exposed and resilient. Taking a shaky breath, Amara pulled out her phone and dialed her father's number. The familiar ringtone was a small comfort amid the turmoil. Within seconds, his warm, steady voice filled her ear. "Amara, are you all right?" Jonathan Coates asked, concern woven into every syllable. Dad, they tore my ticket," she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "The flight attendant said it was fraudulent. I know it's valid. I paid for it through your office." There was a brief pause on the other end before Jonathan's tone shifted from concern to resolute determination. "Listen to me, sweetheart. I'm on my way. Stay right where you are." Almost immediately, as if summoned by her distress, the flight attendant's dismissive gaze met Amara's again. Gloria's eyes narrowed, her posture rigid as she moved to assist the next passenger. But her cold expression couldn't mask the underlying tension that now radiated from the counter. Amara's fingers tightened around the torn ticket, the paper now a symbol of injustice. Minutes later, amid the buzz of the terminal, a sleek black car pulled up. The driver stepped out and, with an air of quiet authority, greeted Amara by name. "Miss Amara, Mr. Coates is here to see you," he said, guiding her toward the arrivals area with swift efficiency. As she walked alongside him, Amara's thoughts churned. Every whispered comment from nearby travelers, some pitying, some curious, felt like a reminder of the public spectacle forced upon her. Yet beneath the sting of embarrassment, a spark of determination began to kindle. She refused to let this incident define her. Inside the terminal's quieter lounge area, Jonathan Coates, dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of understated power, awaited her with an expression that combined both concern and controlled fury. The moment Amara saw him, tears welled up in her eyes, and she rushed into his arms. "Dad, I felt so humiliated," she whispered. Jonathan held her tightly, his voice low and soothing yet edged with resolve. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that. That woman has no right to judge you or your ticket. I promise you we'll get to the bottom of this." Just then, a nearby supervisor, Richard, whose face had been hidden behind a name tag until now, stepped forward hesitantly. "Mr. Coates, I'm Richard from the gate check-in," he began, his tone apologetic. I'm truly sorry about what happened with the ticket." Jonathan's gaze was steady and unyielding. "Richard, I need a full explanation. Explain why a valid ticket was torn up in broad daylight and why our procedures weren't followed." Richard swallowed hard. "Sir, the flight attendant believed there was something off about the ticket. She claimed it looked fraudulent and took matters into her own hands without proper verification." Amara interjected softly, "But it's all legitimate. I was careful to follow every protocol." Her voice, though trembling, carried the weight of truth. Jonathan nodded, his jaw set in determination. "I'm sure you were. Amara." "Richard, I must insist that this matter be investigated immediately. Such actions are not only unprofessional, they're discriminatory. You understand, don't you?" Richard's eyes flickered with uncertainty as he glanced between Jonathan and Amara. "Yes, Mr. Coates, I understand. I will file a formal complaint with Human Resources right away." As the conversation unfolded, other passengers, having witnessed the heated exchange, began to murmur in support. A kindly older gentleman remarked, "It takes courage to stand up to injustice." His words, gentle and sincere, rippled to the small group gathered nearby. Jonathan continued, his voice calm but laced with an unspoken promise of accountability. Amara, I want you to know that no one should ever be made to feel less because of who they are. We're going to address this head-on. I own this airline, and I will ensure that every passenger is treated with respect. Amara felt a swell of pride and comfort at her father's declaration, even as she clutched the torn pieces of her ticket, symbols of a painful moment. She realized that this incident was about more than just her boarding pass. It was about challenging an unfair system and demanding that every individual be treated with dignity. As the supervisor hurried away to report the incident, Jonathan turned his attention back to Amara. "We will not let prejudice win today," he said firmly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You have every right to travel without being disrespected." In that quiet corner of the bustling terminal, amid the chaos of hurried travel and whispered conversations, a father's unwavering support and a young traveler's courage began to set in motion a call for accountability. The incident had ignited a spark that, Jonathan vowed, would lead to meaningful change within the airline. And as they moved together toward the boarding gate, Amara felt her resolve harden. Today, she had stood at the crossroads of humiliation and hope, and with her father by her side, she was ready to fight for the respect she, and every traveler, deserved. In the quiet aftermath of the confrontation at Gate B, the terminal's noise seemed to fade into the background as the investigation took center stage. Jonathan Coates had swiftly mobilized, and now, in a small, makeshift meeting room behind the check-in area, he, Richard, and a handful of airline representatives gathered to address the incident. Amara, though still visibly shaken, sat nearby with her boarding pass fragments clutched tightly in her hand, determined to see justice done. Richard, the supervisor who'd first reported the incident, cleared his throat as he began. "Mr. Coates, we've initiated an internal review following this morning's events. I want to assure you that we take this matter very seriously." His voice, although polite, wavered slightly under Jonathan's stern gaze. Jonathan leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Richard. "I expect a full and impartial investigation. My daughter's dignity was trampled on in public, and such behavior undermines everything our airline stands for." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle in the room. Amara's heart pounded as she listened from the corner. She recalled Gloria's cold sneer and the way she had dismissed her, as if her ticket, and by extension, Amara herself, was nothing more than a forgery. "I just want you to understand," Amara interjected softly, her voice trembling yet resolute, "that this wasn't just about a ticket. It was about being judged and humiliated because of who I am." Richard shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Amara. "Miss Amara, we're truly sorry you had to experience this," he said, his tone earnest. "We are reviewing all relevant footage and passenger statements to ensure that all details are uncovered." Jonathan's expression darkened. "I paid for every ticket through proper channels, and my daughter's travel documents are valid. I'm not interested in vague apologies or empty assurances." He folded his hands on the table and continued. "Our company prides itself on inclusivity and respect. If any employee, regardless of rank, acts with bias or disregard for our passengers, there will be consequences." A young HR representative, Lisa, spoke up from the back of the room. "We're implementing immediate sensitivity and diversity training as a corrective measure. This incident has highlighted a gap in our procedures, and we're committed to ensuring that every passenger is treated with the respect they deserve." Her words were met with murmurs of agreement, yet Jonathan wasn't satisfied with vague promises. "Training is a start, but accountability must be concrete," Jonathan replied firmly. "I want a written report detailing how this incident happened, what protocols failed, and what steps will be taken to ensure that it never occurs again." Richard nodded, scribbling notes. "I will compile all available evidence, including video footage from the terminal cameras and eyewitness accounts. We'll also review Gloria's past performance records to see if this is part of a pattern." He paused before adding, "We take this very seriously, Mr. Coates." Outside the meeting room, Amara's mind raced with emotions. She felt a simmering anger at the injustice of all, but also a quiet hope that this incident might become a turning point. She recalled her father's repeated words about standing up for what's right and the importance of character over status. Even as she replayed the humiliation in her mind, she felt a spark, an inner resolve to demand change not just for herself, but for every traveler who might be subjected to similar mistreatment. Later that afternoon, as she waited by a window overlooking the busy runway, Amar was approached by a fellow traveler named Marcus, a kind, empathetic soul who had witnessed the earlier commotion. "I just wanted to say, I'm really sorry you went through that," he said, his voice soft. "It takes a lot of strength to stand up when you're wrong like that." Amara managed a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, Marcus. It's hard not to feel overwhelmed by it all sometimes." Marcus nodded. "You know, incidents like these can spark real change. I heard that your father's taking serious steps to ensure it doesn't happen again." Her eyes lit up slightly. "Yes, he's been incredible. It's turning into something bigger than just my ticket. It's about holding the system accountable." Back in the meeting room, as the investigation continued, Jonathan's voice resonated with both authority and compassion. "Our goal is to rebuild trust with every passenger who steps on our planes. I want to see policies revised and comprehensive training implemented. We must create an environment where no one feels devalued or disrespected." Lisa added, "This isn't just a reaction to one incident. It's a commitment to a new standard of service. We'll involve external consultants to review our practices and ensure unbiased assessments." The discussion stretched late into the afternoon, and while there was a tangible tension in the air, there was also a shared sense of responsibility. Amara, quietly listening, felt her resolve solidify. This wasn't merely about her personal humiliation. It was about catalyzing a broader change within an industry that had, at times, neglected its duty to treat every traveler with dignity. As the meeting adjourned and Jonathan assured Amara that the investigation would be thorough, she stepped out into the cool evening light, feeling both the sting of the morning's ordeal and the promise of a better future. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. By standing together against injustice, they were paving the way for lasting transformation, a future where respect and inclusivity weren't just ideals, but everyday realities. In the days following the incident, the halls of the airline's headquarters buzzed with quiet urgency. Jonathan Coates and Amara found themselves at the heart of a sweeping corporate response, a response born not of revenge, but of an unwavering commitment to change. The investigation had unveiled a series of procedural lapses and subtle biases, and now the conversation was shifting from accountability to transformation. One crisp morning, Jonathan and Amara sat together in a sleek conference room lined with glass windows that overlooked the city skyline. The room was filled with key executives and members of the human resources team, all gathered to discuss a new proposal, a comprehensive diversity and bias training program for every employee, from flight attendants to executives. Jonathan cleared his throat, his voice resonant and calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Today's meeting is not about one isolated incident. It's about redefining how we treat every single passenger who trusts us with their journey." His gaze swept over the room, landing on each face with determined intensity. Amara, sitting beside her father, took a deep breath. "I'd like to share my experience," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "This morning, my ticket was torn in front of hundreds of people. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a clear act of bias. I want to make sure that no one else has to feel the humiliation I did." Her words were simple yet powerful, and they resonated with the group. A senior executive, Mr. Daniels, leaned forward. "Ms. Amara, we appreciate your courage. Can you explain what happened in your own words?" he asked, pen poised over his notebook. Amara nodded. "I approached the gate with nothing but hope and determination. But when the flight attendant, Gloria, questioned my ticket's legitimacy and then ripped it apart, without any proper verification, it wasn't just my ticket she destroyed. She was stripping away my dignity." Her voice wavered briefly before gaining strength. "I'm here today not to dwell on that pain, but to demand a change, a system where every passenger is treated with the respect they deserve." There was a hushed murmur of agreement from the room. Jonathan added, "We are an airline built on the promise of safe, respectful travel. If one of our own behaves with bias, it reflects on all of us. That's why I'm proposing an immediate rollout of a mandatory training program that addresses diversity, inclusion, and bias." A younger HR manager, Lisa, interjected enthusiastically. We've already begun preliminary talks with external consultants who specialize in this area. We can develop interactive modules and real-life scenario training that will help employees identify and correct subconscious biases. Her words sparked a ripple of nods around the table. Mr. Daniels leaned back thoughtfully. I agree this is the right direction. However, can we ensure that the training isn't just a checkbox exercise? How do we measure its impact? Jonathan smiled, a mix of pride and resolve in his eyes. We'll set clear metrics, improve passenger feedback, reduced incidents, and even employee self-assessments. This isn't just about compliance. It's about creating a culture of empathy and respect. He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to settle in. And make no mistake, this training will be mandatory for every level of our organization. Amara felt a surge of hope. She remembered her father's quiet words of wisdom and the lessons she had learned at the leadership conference. I want to add that it's essential to include real-life stories in the curriculum, she said softly. Stories like mine. When employees hear firsthand accounts of discrimination, it can change perspectives. It can humanize our policies and remind us that behind every ticket is a person with hopes, dreams, and dignity. The room fell silent for a moment as executives exchanged glances, clearly moved by her passion. Finally, Mr. Daniels spoke again, his tone measured. Ms. Amara, your experience is a stark reminder that our work is never done. I believe this proposal is not only necessary, but overdue. Let's commit to a pilot program within the next quarter and review the results thoroughly. Jonathan nodded firmly. Thank you. This is just the beginning. We're going to work together to ensure that our airline isn't just a service provider, but a leader in fostering an inclusive environment. Outside the boardroom, as the meeting drew to a close, Amara and Jonathan walked together in the quiet corridor. The tension of recent days was beginning to give way to a sense of cautious optimism. Jonathan put an arm around his daughter. I'm proud of you, Amara. Today, you've not only stood up for yourself, you've helped set a new standard for how we treat people. This isn't just a victory for our family. It's a victory for every traveler who deserves respect. Amara smiled, feeling the weight of the day lift slightly. I hope our experience can help others avoid what I went through, she said softly. Maybe one day, no one will have to face such humiliation. And so, in that moment of unity and resolve, the seeds of transformation were sown. Amid the high-rise buildings and the quiet hum of corporate ambition, a small act of courage had ignited a movement, one that promised to reshape an entire airline into a beacon of fairness and empathy. A few weeks later, the changes began to take root, both within the airline and in the hearts of its employees. The board had given their full support to the diversity and bias training program, and the pilot sessions had just wrapped up. The transformation was not instantaneous, but every conversation, every feedback form, and every small breakthrough was a stepping stone to a more respectful and inclusive culture. Amara had returned to her everyday life, but the impact of that fateful day at the gate remained a constant source of strength. She noticed subtle yet powerful shifts among the airline staff. In the terminal, familiar faces once marked by indifference now greeted passengers with genuine warmth. Even Gloria, the flight attendant responsible for the humiliating incident, had been noticeably absent from duty as the investigation progressed and the training program took shape. One bright morning, as Amara prepared to board a return flight, she found herself waiting in the same bustling terminal. But this time, there was a new air of reassurance. A banner above the gate read, "Welcome to a new era of respect and inclusion," and it was hard to ignore the palpable sense of optimism that had replaced the earlier tension. Jonathan Coates, ever the vigilant guardian of his daughter's dignity and the company's integrity, was present as well. His presence served as a constant reminder that real change often begins with a single courageous act. As they waited near the gate, Jonathan checked his phone and smiled at the latest update from the Human Resources team. The pilot program had received overwhelmingly positive feedback, and plans for a full-scale rollout were already underway. Nearby, a young flight attendant approached and offered a shy smile. "Miss Amara, I just wanted to say thank you," she said softly. "I attended one of the training sessions, and it really opened my eyes. I promise to treat every passenger with the dignity they deserve from now on." Amara felt a surge of hope. It was clear that the initiative was already sparking genuine change within the ranks, and that her painful experience had paved the way for healing and growth. In the lounge area, a group of employees gathered for an informal discussion. Their voices carried stories of past mistakes and shared commitments to improvement. One of them admitted, "I never realized how much bias affected our interactions until I heard Amara's story. It's time we all do better." Their conversation was earnest and reflective, a stark contrast to the dismissive attitudes that had once dominated. On board the flight, as Amara settled into her seat with a sense of calm assurance, she reflected on how far they had come. The memory of the torn ticket was still there, a bitter reminder of what she had endured. Yet, it had also become the catalyst for a powerful movement, a movement that had transformed a single incident of public humiliation into a beacon of hope for fairness and respect. As the plane ascended into a sky painted with the soft hues of sunrise, Amara's thoughts turned inward. She realized that change was rarely easy and that the journey toward equality required both courage and compassion. It wasn't simply about retribution or corporate reform. It was about reaffirming the inherent dignity of every person. Her father's unwavering support had taught her that standing up for oneself and for others was a responsibility that transcended personal hardship. In a quiet moment of introspection, Amara pulled out her phone and recorded a brief message for those who had followed her story. "Sometimes," she began, her voice steady and resolute, "when injustice strikes, it can feel like the whole world is against you. But know this, every act of courage, no matter how small, has the power to ignite change. I learned that even when you're humbled in public, you can rise again, with hope, with determination, and with the support of those who believe in you. Let's make sure no one's dignity is ever compromised again." Her message resonated deeply, carrying the promise of transformation far beyond the confines of that one airport terminal. As the flight soared through the skies, Amara looked out the window at a horizon filled with endless possibility, confident that today's struggle was the beginning of a future defined by respect, empathy, and the power of unity. In conclusion, this story is a reminder that every challenge can become a catalyst for change. When faced with injustice, standing up for your dignity isn't just an act of courage. It's a commitment to a more inclusive and respectful world. Let this be a call to action. Challenge bias, demand accountability, and always treat others with empathy. Your voice matters, and even a small act of resistance can spark a powerful movement. Remember, every time you stand firm for what is right, you pave the way for a brighter future for yourself and those around you. Together, we can transform moments of humiliation into opportunities for growth and lasting change. Stand tall, speak up, and never let anyone diminish your worth.